Hello there. Welcome to my tiny corner of the internet. Sit back, relax, and follow along as I demonstrate just how woefully unoriginal I am when it comes to the random games that I play and things that I do. So on today's episode, watch in amusement as this rural old person experiences Twilight 2000, the first edition, or I was told there wouldn't be any math. But yeah, this is the first edition box set from 1984. I think I picked this up at a garage sale in the late 80s, and I never got a chance to play it. It looked cool to me back in the day. Still looks cool now. So I'm going to try a solo campaign and see what comes of it. So yeah. The game came with 4d6 and 1d10. I've added a d10 just to make rolling percentile checks easier. Those aren't the original dice. I don't know where those went, but like I said, I got mine at a garage sale. Things are broken up into different manuals, charts, pamphlets, lists, and that is further broken down by stuff the referee needs and stuff the players will need. So starting off with the referee's manual, you can see it's pretty short. It's only 31 pages, and it just dives right in. It starts telling the referee more about character abilities and attributes, skills, tasks, what they can do, what the skills cover, some suggested uses, difficulty numbers, that sort of a thing. It goes over skills improvement, which this was the first game that I ran into where you could improve a skill by watching another character succeed at using that skill. So I thought that was a cool mechanic. We'll see how often that comes into play. Yeah, it's here. It's under observation. You can observe someone doing it. You can also be taught through instruction. So yeah. And if you don't find a skill that covers exactly what you want to do, there's some suggestions on making new skills. There's some additional details on combat that are given here. It looks like it covers explosions, chemical weapons, that sort of thing. Now, most combat is detailed in the player's guide, which we'll get to shortly. But these are just some additional rules that aren't covered there. You got landmines. The whole section on vehicle damage. Now, that's one thing I never really got into on my read-throughs. I don't know how that's going to play out, so I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. How you recover from post-battle damage, wounds, using animals in combat. They're going to have morale checks, things like that. So, the encounter section. This is the meat of the referee's manual, and these pages detail everything that you can come across in the world of Twilight 2000 as you're making your way across the map. That can range anywhere from packs of wild dogs to refugees, settlements, marauders, up to full-on military units. And this game is very dangerous. In fact, it says right here, the referee first examines the base unit description. If there are several different base unit descriptions, as there are in most cases, he rolls 1d6 to determine the actual type of base unit. He then rolls 1d10 to determine the number of base units in the group. That sounds pretty straightforward and all, but now, for example, say we encountered some army groups. We'll roll 1d6. It's 1 to 2. That means it's a foot patrol. Now, how many foot patrol units are there? There are That's 9. That's a very bad roll. So there's 10 soldiers in a foot patrol unit, and we encountered 9 of those. So we just ran into 90 soldiers. That's pretty dangerous. That's very dangerous. Yeah, I don't anticipate living long. You can also run into settlements. Civilian, towns are still around. Some of them have been taken over by marauders. Others are, army units are garrisoned there. All sorts of things. A lot of them are still in ruins. Civilization has essentially collapsed, but people are still finding ways to eke out a living. NPC motivations and goals are discussed, and this was the first time I ran into this particular mechanic where you draw some playing cards to figure out what the NPCs are doing. So, like for example, if you drew a diamond card, that means it's wealth. Hearts is fellowship, and so on and so forth. And then, if it's a 2 to an ace, that's a further scale of that wealth or fellowship or violence or what have you. I know a lot of games do that nowadays, but this was the first time I'd run into something like that, and I thought that was pretty unique. And I know that that's still in use in the 4th edition. Got some additional rules here on radiation and disease. Those are 2 things that you don't want to have happen to you, but probably will, being as it is post-World War III. There are still some outposts and cities around where you can conduct trade and commerce. You can find new gear. You can barter for different things. You might have some gold or, ammunition that you can use for payment. And then just some clarification on things like, visibility, repairing equipment. If there's electricity available, there's rules for swimming. And then the rest of the referee's manual is given over to the background. This is the history of the world that you're playing in. Now, it starts in 1995, and it goes up until the current day of year 2000, which is when the adventures are set. Now, keep in mind, this game was published in 1984. So today, in 2025, it's 41 years old. And at the time, this was set 16 years in the future. So, the Cold War was still going on in 84. The Berlin Wall was still there. Soviet Union still existed. East and West Germany. This was the days of the Cold War. So they came up with, a plausible history of how things went south, why the nukes started flying. Some of it works, some of it doesn't, but for what it is, it works. It's just fine. Most of this isn't going to come into play unless you have a character that is specifically interested in something like this, because at the end of the day, it's not important how civilization ended, just that it did, and now we're trying to deal with the aftermath. The campaign is set in Poland, so you get a little description of the land, where the hostile forces are located by geographical region within Poland. These are almost exclusively Warsaw Pact forces, so Soviet, Polish, East German, that sort of a thing. You will run across some scattered remnants of NATO forces, though. They may or may not be friendly. Keep that in mind. They could be deserters, and maybe they're just out for themselves. You never know. So yeah, that is the referee's manual. Here is the referee's charts. Now these are set up in such a way as to facilitate ease of gameplay. Theoretically, this is everything the referee will need to run an adventure, and it's all in this handy dandy booklet. So everything from weapon damage to vehicle capacities, encounters, that sort of a thing. Our equipment list. This is an important thing to have. This describes to you what the equipment in the game is, what you can do with it, what type of ammunition the guns and such weapons use. You've got your different types of vehicles, miscellaneous equipment. That's everything from hand tools, radios, medical gear, body armor, other equipment. Good stuff to have. This is the price list. It's also broken down by rarity. And like, for example, say you want an FAL battle rifle. That's going to cost you $600. And the S means that it is scarce for NATO personnel. R means it is rare for Warsaw Pact. And that convention follows through on just about everything. But yeah, if you want to buy yourself an M1 Abrams battle tank, those start at $650,000. So, roll good. This is the errata sheet. It was put out in 1985, so I don't think this was included in my box set. I think I printed this off the internet at a later date because the paper is different. It's brighter. But it just covers some things that they left out of the various books and charts. They forgot some skills. They forgot landmine data. They left a couple of towns off the map. But this just cleans that up a little bit, makes it cleaner. This is the play manual. This is sort of the heart and soul of the game. You're going to refer to this one a lot because this covers everything from character generation, what your statistics do, what your attributes do, what the skills do, how your military experience comes into play, what your starting radiation is, your rank. The service branch and specialty is important. That determines what type of character you are, and that's actually based on a dice roll. So the higher you roll, the better. We'll get to more of that later on the player's charts. It shows you how you obtain different skills. It explains your base hit numbers. It's essentially a percentile roll against a set number based on the range that combat is taking place at. Different types of equipment. It's kind of funny. It's just a one-page blurb on what your skills and attributes do. So it's very concise, very distilled, just like the referee's manual. Time and travel. The encounters is just this little section here, whereas in the referee's manual, it was multiple pages of death and doom. Train, travel, fatigue. Your characters, they need to watch out. Upkeep. This is important. This was the first game that I really ran into that you had to upkeep things and not just yourself. So you're driving a vehicle, you need to maintain it. It might need spare parts. It's going to need fuel, so you got to distill some gas. You've got your weapons. You got to keep them clean. You might need tools to repair them. You need to eat. They've got rules for foraging and fishing and hunting game. Canned food and MREs are a luxury these days. If you've got horses or animals, you need to take care of them. Make sure that they're not going lame or starving. There's a lot of bookkeeping involved. Then we get into combat. The rest of the book is given over to the combat rules. It's essentially pretty easy. You just roll to see if you hit, and if you've hit, you then figure out where the round hit and how much damage it did. So theoretically, it should be fairly streamlined combat. That does give you some movement rules, what you can do during combat, different actions you can take, like if you want to aim, if you want to reload, if you want to pick up your spent brass, if you're trying to crawl away, if you want to throw a grenade, something like that. Coolness under fire, very important stat. It's just that. It determines how cool you are under fire. Characters with a very low score, being like a 1 or a 2, they're rattled very infrequently. So these are like your grizzled sergeants and such that have seen a lot of combat. Nothing phases them. If they put their mind to what they're going to do during a combat turn, they're usually going to get it done. Whereas somebody that is not cool under fire, they're scared, and that's completely believable. They're not going to want to stick their head out because they don't want to get shot. So that's going to reflect in their ability to do things during a turn. Their coolness under fire rating will get in the way of them completing certain actions. Goes into combat, melee combat. You got your fire combat, which is essentially ranged combat, which breaks down into direct fire, i.e. you can see your target, versus indirect fire. You can't see your target. And this would be obvious, you're shooting your pistol or a bow and arrow or something at a target that you can see versus something you can't see, like you're shooting a mortar over a hill, or you find an artillery piece and you're going to bombard a town that you can't see, something like that. So it gives you different rules for both kinds. And then finally, damage is the last big thing. Types of hits, there's critical hits. If you get hit in the head, that's very bad. If you get hit in the abdomen, that's only slightly less bad. Death is going to happen a lot, probably. NPCs, it says right here, it's not necessary to keep track of their hits to NPCs or animals in detail. You can if you'd like to. It just adds some additional bookkeeping. So, here's the player's charts. This is very handy to have for when you're making a character, because the main gist of this is these are all the skills that are available to you. And it's further broken down by whether it's a military, a background, or an educational skill. And that's M, B, or E, respectively. Now, this is important to know because based on your attributes that you rolled, you will have a varying number of military and education skill points to use to purchase skills. Every character, regardless of how good or bad you roll, gets 300 background skill points to purchase skills with. But the downside to that is, you can only use military skill points to increase something that has an M. You can only use background to increase something that has a B, and only education points for something that has an E. And on the back, we've got your service branch and specialty table. We touched on that earlier. This is important in that it determines what your character can do. And what you do is you pick something on this list that you want your character to do, and then you roll for it. So let's say we want our guy to be a special forces dude. That's an 8 is the roll. So you roll 2d6. We got a 7, so we didn't make it. So now we have to pick something else to be, and we roll it again at -2. So let's say, okay, I'm just going to be a combat medic. So that's a 6. So we made it, because that's an 8, -2, because it's our first reroll. That's a 6. So we're able to be a combat medic. What happens is, if we had failed that roll, we would re-roll it again at -4, and then at -6, etc., until finally you're not able to qualify for anything except the basic support services. Obviously, the higher you roll, the better options are available. Things like intelligence analysts, spies, special forces people. And it goes down through like tank crewmen, artillery, medical, You've got your engineers, your infantry, and then your support services. These are mechanics and electricians, stuff like that. Now, that's not to say that these characters are not just as important as the more prestigious guys, because these guys are what keeps your stuff running. These guys are who distills your fuel. These guys are, in many ways, they are the unsung heroes of any group, because without them, everybody's hoofing it. So yeah. All right. Then we get into the beginning adventure, the escape from Calais. And I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce a lot of, well, any Polish words. I don't know if that's how you pronounce Calais or not, but that's how I say it, so I hope that's at least in the ballpark. At any rate, this was cool. I remember back in the day, it was nice to get an adventure with the game. For those of you that played the red box basic D&D set, it came with the Keep on the Borderlands. This is very similar to that. It came with an adventure. Now, Escape from Calais is not as detailed or as well known as the Keep on the Borderlands, but it was cool nonetheless to have an adventure included so you could see what the idea behind the game was and what you're supposed to do with it. This first handout is really meant for the referee. It details all the towns that are in the area of the starting map, which is right here. Each town that's listed or shown is detailed in this booklet. It'll tell you how many troops are stationed there, if the civilian population is friendly or hostile to the characters, things like that. And they might have little, hooks included in there. Not necessarily adventure hooks per se, but it might mention that, these town folk are unhappy because, the Soviets are treating them poorly. Or, these citizens are, being pillaged by marauders that are nearby, and they'll react favorably to anybody who takes care of that problem. But this whole Escape from Calais it's like the ultimate sandbox adventure. There's no key dungeon that you explore. It's just a map, some handouts, information. This is a background of the days leading up to the start of the campaign with an intelligence briefing that you can give to the players that shows the supposed locations of, NATO and Warsaw Pact forces in the area. And then you just go from there. So yeah, sandbox in every sense of the word. It came with a cool full-color fold-out map. It stretches from Berlin all the way past Warsaw. So this is Poland. This was what used to be East Germany, or I guess it maybe still is East Germany in this game. You've got the mountains down here of Czechoslovakia, Austria, and lots of marshy wetlands, rivers running all over the place. Highways are the reds, and these are the major thoroughfares and waterways and whatnot. But as you can see, Calais is right here, and you are hundreds of kilometers from any friendly forces. So you are definitely behind enemy lines. And here we have the famous or infamous character generation worksheet. And that is exactly what it is. You roll dice and you do a lot of math to figure out what your character is. These are double-sided, but it's the same thing on both sides. So the game recommends that you photocopy a bunch of these for use when making characters, or do like I did and just find it and print it off the internet. But you use these to fill out your character sheet. And these are double-sided, but on the back is a vehicle record sheet, whereas on the front is your character information. Now, the generation worksheet is a little bit involved, too involved for this video, but I'll do a follow-up on that when I start making characters, and we'll get into that then. For now, I'll just touch on the character sheet. I make my own. I don't really use vehicle record sheets all that much, and I have found that these are a little bit lacking in that they don't have all the information on the sheet that I would like to see. Like, for example, there's nowhere to put information about your weapon statistics. And in this sort of a game, I like to be able to see at a glance what my different weapons can do if I'm being charged by, 80 hostile soldiers. And that is essentially it. Last thing in the box was the contents of this box sheet, and it has everything in there that we just went over. It says right here, this game includes 4 6-sided dice and 1 10-sided dice. So, yeah, that's why I added 1d10. I think the only thing that's missing out of the box that came with the original one that I don't have is the little postcard that you could send away to Game Design's Workshop for, a catalog, maybe a sheet of their other game offerings. But that wasn't in this box set, and like I say, I picked this thing up back in the late 1980s, so maybe it was there at one point, and maybe I lost it over the intervening decades. But yeah, that is Twilight 2000, the first edition, and I will be getting into a solo adventure / campaign very shortly. I don't anticipate I'm going to live a long time, but we're going to have some fun. So yeah, that is what I've got. Hope you enjoyed it, and if there's any questions that you had, feel free. I don't even know if this video will have comments or not. I'm not familiar with YouTube. Maybe that will grow in familiarity as I go along with this, but maybe those answers will come in the next video. Who knows? So take care. We'll catch you later. Bye.